The moment I opened my shed and saw the glowing, humming modem I didn't install, I knew someone was about to regret underestimating an IT guy. It wasn't even hidden well. Right there, behind my lawnmower, a sleek black router humming like it owned the place. Ethernet cable snaking through my tools, duct taped to the wall, vanishing out a new drill hole I sure as hell didn't make. They didn't even wipe the drywall dust. At first, I thought maybe someone was messing with me. Then I followed the cable. Across the yard, under the back fence, straight through the hedgerow, and, would you look at that, it led directly into the HOA office next door. Oh, hell no. I live in a planned community. Moved here after retiring early from 20 years in cybersecurity. Bought a little 2-bedroom with a workshop out back. Figured I'd do some woodworking, grill in peace, maybe teach online part-time. Not wage war with a suburban dictatorship. See, our HOA is run by one Karen Montrose. Mid-50s. Platinum bob. Cardigan collection that could rival a department store. She once fined a neighbor $200 for having a wind chime that violated auditory uniformity guidelines. She's the kind of woman who prints her own parking tickets. A little too enthusiastic about authority, if you asked me. I've had run-ins with Karen before. Got dinged for non-conforming mulch color. Once. Whatever. I paid the fine, changed the mulch, and let her feel like she won. But this? Running a Wi-Fi cable through my private property, installing equipment in my shed, this wasn't petty. This was criminal. So I took pictures. Snapped a full set, modem, cable path, IP addresses on the router interface. Popped open my laptop and traced the MAC address. Bingo, registered to a corporate account under the HOA's name. They'd been bouncing a signal from my shed to power public Wi-Fi in the clubhouse, the pool, even the damn dog park. There. Free Community Internet Initiative. Powered by me. Without permission, without payment, and without a clue who they were stealing from. Now, they could have asked. Hell, they could have offered me $50 and a pizza a month and I might have said yes. But instead, they snuck in like cable raccoons and tried to make me their infrastructure mule. Wrong guy. I didn't yank the cable. Not yet. I had something better in mind. First, I installed a traffic sniffer on the router. Logged every connection, every website, every upload. Purely for documentation purposes, of course. Then I set up my own equipment. A silent Raspberry Pi in the corner, running a proxy firewall I'd built in my downtime. It wasn't just logging traffic, it was controlling it. I set bandwidth throttling by MAC address. Karen's laptop? 512 kbps max. The HOA cameras? Dropped them to black and white ping sweeps. The community printer? Gave it a 10-second delay on every command, just to be annoying. Oh, and I added parental controls. Strict ones. One keyword, anything spicy, political, or remotely adult, and the session shut down like a chastity belt on a church server. Then came the billing system. I wrote a script that measured total gigabytes passed through my network and generated invoices automatically. Every Monday morning, Karen would receive a new bill, itemized. Every MAC address. Every data burst. Labeled. Unauthorized bandwidth consumption from private property. Rate? $8.99 per gigabyte. Discounted from the industry average, of course. I'm not a monster. The best part? The invoices looked official. Clean, professional, stamped with a watermark that read, "Courtesy notification, digital easement violation." I knew she wouldn't understand what that meant. But it sounded legal enough to scare her into paying attention. Still, I stayed quiet. Let it run. Let them dig themselves deeper. By the end of the first week, they'd used over 180 gigabytes. Mostly video conferencing, security feeds, and oddly enough, a lot of reality TV streams. I didn't judge. But I did log everything. On the 8th day, I sent the first invoice. Subject line: bandwidth usage alert, immediate attention required. Body text? Short and sweet. As of this billing period, 187.06 gigabytes of network traffic has been routed through infrastructure located on private property without authorization. Please remit payment or disconnect usage within 5 business days to avoid further escalation. Attached was a PDF with the log files. She didn't reply. Instead, the next morning, I got a letter from the HOA. Not about the cable. No, about my shed. Said it was non-compliant with airflow guidelines. Something about not having sufficient ventilation slats on the east-facing panel. A $75 fine. That's when I knew. She got the invoice. She wasn't going to admit anything. She was going to get petty. Fine. Let's play. I paid the $75 immediately. Attached a note. Ventilation confirmed. Then I throttled her devices to 1 kilobit per second. And I added a new feature to my script, a redirect page that popped up once per hour on her browser, reading. Notice, bandwidth currently restricted due to unpaid usage fees. Please remit balance to restore service. Thank you, and have a compliant day. The next invoice showed 342 gigabytes used, along with a 22-page list of every domain accessed by her laptop, organized by category. I highlighted entertainment and adult hobby forums in pink, purely for aesthetics. Still no payment. Still no acknowledgement. But the fines? Oh, they kept coming. Shed violation. Grass too long. Decorative hose storage. Out of regulation alignment. She was desperate. I could feel the pressure mounting. Then came the security meeting. Held over Zoom. Entire HOA board in attendance. Karen tried to lead it, but the connection kept dropping. Audio cut in and out. Screens froze. I watched the stream from my laptop while sipping iced tea, smiling like a Bond villain. Someone needs to fix the internet, Karen said, lagging 3 seconds behind reality. Someone already did, Karen. Someone already did. Karen had no clue how deep she'd sunk. She ignored both invoices, filed 2 more fines against me, and sent a community-wide email about respecting HOA authority. Meanwhile, I was quietly building her digital prison, brick by invisible brick. I expanded the proxy's capabilities. Now it didn't just log traffic, it categorized it. I added AI filters to sort everything by site type, usage time, and device. Karen's work laptop alone had an appetite for gossip sites, conspiracy forums, and oddly specific, DIY divorce revenge blogs. The HOA security system streamed in low resolution now, with random 5-second lags. Their Clubhouse printer developed a mysterious stutter. Everything felt cursed on their end. On mine? Smooth as silk. I tracked device names too. Karen's phone. Madam President. Her tablet. HOA Queen. Her husband's smart TV? Big Kev 420. And all of them gobbling data like free samples at a supermarket. On Saturday, their Alexa started repeating commands, because I throttled the voice recognition server to crawl speed. Karen thought it was haunted. I just kept sipping coffee. I began printing the invoices on fine parchment paper, sealing them with wax, and hand-delivering them to the HOA office mailbox. The subject line remained the same. Bandwidth usage violation, second notice. Each one contained the full usage breakdown, dollar amount due, and the gentle reminder. Unauthorized infrastructure use detected on private property. Ongoing activity implies acknowledgement of liability. They use 514 gigabytes in the second week. I billed them $4,621.86. She still wouldn't respond. But she did escalate. A third fine arrived, this time for unauthorized structure color variance. She claimed the inside of my shed wasn't neutral beige, like the exterior. That's when I knew she'd snapped. She wasn't just trying to deflect now, she was trying to break me. She didn't understand who she was dealing with. I activated the meter. From that point on, the system displayed a running total. Any device using the line through my shed got a pop-up in the corner. Current usage, XX.XXGB, charges incurred, $XXX.XX. It was designed to feel like a utility. Cold. Professional. Unrelenting. I also added payment options. Venmo. PayPal. Crypto. Convenience mattered. Karen's next move came in the form of a cease and desist letter. Hand-delivered, in triplicate, stamped with the HOA seal. She accused me of digital extortion, impersonation of a utility provider, and technological harassment. I read the letter twice. Then I laughed for a full minute. I printed my own response, professionally formatted and bound in a plastic sleeve. Dear Ms. Montrose, thank you for acknowledging receipt of the bandwidth invoices. As for your accusations, please be advised that the infrastructure in question is entirely mine, situated on my property, and installed without my consent by parties under your direct supervision. Should you wish to pursue legal action, I invite discovery proceedings. Attached is a full chain of custody document detailing all device activity on the unauthorized network segment. Sincerely, the guy you tried to steal Wi-Fi from. I included a flash drive with the logs. She didn't respond directly, but at the next HOA meeting, she looked pale, tight-lipped, and twitchy. The Zoom connection stuttered throughout. Everyone blamed Karen's internet. She blamed the technical environment. No one bought it. By this point, I'd roped in an ally. Nate, a neighbor 3 doors down, worked in municipal planning. When I showed him the pictures of the cable and the modem in my shed, his reaction was priceless. They drilled into your shed? He said. Without your signature on the infrastructure variance request, that's a code violation. I nodded. And I have timestamped footage. He offered to file a report. I didn't even ask him to. He just wanted to. So now, Karen wasn't just facing a cranky resident. She was facing an HOA member with irrefutable digital proof, a paper trail, and growing neighborhood support. I kept feeding small updates to Nate, never anything inflammatory, just the facts. They're up to 1.2 terabytes total now. Karen's laptop keeps auto-refreshing a Reddit page called HOA Nightmares. Fitting. Around that time, I enabled the Content Report feature. Once a week, Karen received an auto-generated document titled User Activity Summary, Compliance Monitoring. Inside? Her own browsing history, organized into colored charts. Purple for media. Red for adult. Yellow for questionable search terms. She stopped using the laptop for a few days after that. I knew because the usage dipped. Then it shot back up, almost like she was trying to hide the spike. She'd switched devices. Smart move. Except I'd already coded device identification into the proxy. No matter what she used, it got tagged and tracked. I added another layer of fun, scheduled redirects. Every 24 hours, each device on the HOA line got rerouted for 5 minutes to a landing page that read, "This bandwidth is currently operating under a private meter. Please remit unpaid invoices to restore full functionality. Unauthorized usage may be reported." It was polite, but firm. Unavoidable. I didn't want to ruin her life. I just wanted her to stop thinking she could operate like a petty tyrant in khakis. The neighborhood slowly started catching on. Residents who'd been using the community Wi-Fi began complaining. Slow speeds. Random cutouts. Connection drops during Netflix. Karen tried blaming it on a regional outage. But by now, too many people were hearing whispers of the truth. Someone asked about it during open floor at the HOA meeting. Karen froze. Said she wasn't at liberty to discuss operational logistics. One board member quit that week. Another asked me, privately, what I knew. I told him the truth, cordially. Explained that the Wi-Fi ran through my property without my permission and that I had simply placed limits on what I considered theft. He didn't argue. He nodded and said, "Damn. That explains a lot." By the third invoice, Karen's data usage exceeded 2.7 terabytes. The total bill had ballooned past $24,000. I printed a large format poster of the invoice and dropped it at the HOA office, folded neatly inside a manila envelope labeled Statement Number 3, Urgent. The next day, someone unscrewed the cable from inside my shed. But it was too late. Because I wasn't done. When Karen got wind of the third invoice, her reaction was exactly what I expected. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer a settlement. No, Karen decided it was time to play hardball. She filed a formal complaint with the local police, accusing me of hacking and digital sabotage. Oh, she wasn't about to let me just steal her precious bandwidth without a fight. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I could almost hear the smugness in her voice when she called me to settle the matter peacefully. The whole neighborhood could hear it, too, when she blared the conversation on speakerphone at the HOA meeting. I didn't answer her calls, because I knew better. Instead, I waited for her to escalate. I had all the leverage I needed, and I knew it. The complaint was laughable. She showed up at my door one afternoon, with a sheriff's deputy trailing her like a shadow, the paper from the police report in hand. I almost felt bad for the guy. His face was blank as he handed me the document. Karen had really gone all in. She was trying to scare me into paying her fines by claiming I was interfering with a lawful network. The deputy barely looked at the report before I handed him my counterclaim. I didn't even have to speak. I opened my laptop, pulled up the network logs, and showed him the records of everything she'd accessed using my bandwidth. The timestamps. The data packets. The entire shebang. I'd been logging every single click Karen made on my network since I first noticed the rogue cable. Her browsing history alone was a masterpiece of irony. I could almost hear the cringe through the screen when I ran the traffic report. The deputy wasn't impressed with Karen's legal threats after seeing the data. He'd been to enough HOA squabbles to know this was one giant game of chicken. He didn't make any arrests, because he couldn't. There was no crime to report. But the look on Karen's face was priceless. This was the first time she'd ever met someone who wasn't intimidated by her, who didn't buckle under her pressure tactics. I took a deep breath, stood up, and made my way to the door. Karen was still flapping her gums, accusing me of extortion. But I cut her off. Look, Karen, I'll tell you what. You want to get this settled? I'll tell you exactly how to do it. She paused, probably expecting a bribe, a groveling apology. But I wasn't about to play that game. You'll need to hire a lawyer. You'll need to send a formal request for reimbursement for all the unpaid bandwidth charges. We can take it to court if that's what you want, but I'll be filing a counterclaim for damages. I didn't need to add more. She could already hear what that meant. The deputy looked between us, as if weighing his next words carefully. I'm gonna let you two figure this out, but you might want to talk to a lawyer, Mrs. Montrose. This is getting into deep water. The deputy left, and Karen stood there, stunned. This wasn't the confrontation she was expecting. She came to intimidate me, to shut me down, and instead I turned it all around, making it clear I had everything on my side. Her mind was racing now, but there was no way out. I wasn't done with her yet. It wasn't just about the bandwidth anymore. This was about sending a message. I'd already gotten enough evidence to bring the HOA to its knees if it came to that, but I didn't need to destroy them. No, I had a better plan. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to make sure Karen understood that I was the one in charge now. The next day, I started preparing. I wasn't going to send a lawyer's letter. I didn't need one. I wrote up a detailed, professional document myself, a legal memorandum outlining the entire case from the moment the cable was illegally installed to my actions of documenting it and responding. I even included a full financial breakdown of her data usage, a polite reminder that this was all on record, and a suggestion that she may want to reconsider any further action before escalating things any further. Then I filed the paperwork. Every HOA member got a copy of the document. I made sure they saw the letter that went directly to the local Consumer Protection Office. The County Utility Board? They had the same one too. Everyone was getting an education in HOA overreach, whether they liked it or not. I didn't stop there. I took the next logical step. I set up an online fundraiser. It was tongue-in-cheek, of course, labeled the Karen Montrose Fund for Legal Defense, to fight all those pesky Wi-Fi charges. It had a goal of $100,000, and I made sure the entire neighborhood knew about it. I even posted about it on the local Facebook group. Karen had been trying to keep up the facade of being the fearless HOA president, but now she was a laughingstock. People were donating. Not because they wanted to support her, hell no, but because it was hilarious. I made sure the entire fundraising page was dripping in sarcasm. Every donation had a little comment box. Let's see if she can fight the system with more than just her Wi-Fi privileges. By the end of the week, her emails had stopped coming. The HOA started backing off. They were too scared to take legal action because they knew they'd lose. But Karen? She was stuck trying to figure out how to fix this mess she created. I could almost hear the panic in her voice when she called to try and negotiate. I ignored her calls. Let her stew. She'd played her hand, and now it was my turn to control the game. But even as Karen seethed and plotted, I stayed calm, knowing that I'd already won. Because the best part, I wasn't even trying to win. I was just having fun watching her unravel. The next HOA meeting? It was a joke. The entire room was filled with people who had no clue what to do now. I walked in late, dropped a binder full of legal filings on the table, and smiled. Karen's reign was officially over. And the best part? I didn't need to say a word. By the time Karen realized what was happening, it was already too late. The neighborhood had turned on her. Her reputation as the iron-fisted HOA president was in shambles, and no one was buying her sob story about being the victim of a digital attack. Not when her search history and browsing habits were plastered across local forums, and not when everyone knew she was the one responsible for hijacking private property for her personal gain. It didn't help that I was still sending those invoices. Every Monday, without fail, she received a new bill, each one more ridiculous than the last. After the fifth invoice, she started sending me angry emails demanding that I stop harassing her. Of course, she didn't actually have the audacity to mention the Wi-Fi cable running through my shed in those messages. It was all deflection. She tried to act like I was the one who was out of line, but everyone knew better. As the weeks went on, more neighbors started getting curious. My little operation wasn't just about bandwidth anymore. It was about accountability. When you're a resident of a community, you expect a certain level of respect, a certain acknowledgement that you're not just a cash cow for some petty tyrant in a cardigan. And Karen? She forgot that. She thought she could steal from me without any consequences. But I'd made sure to remind her that no one gets away with that kind of thing, not in my neighborhood. One evening, I received an email from the HOA board. It wasn't a demand for payment, or even a threat of legal action. No, they were asking me to come to a special session to discuss the situation. They wanted to reach an understanding. The email was polite, of course, but it was clear they were running out of options. The whole community had turned against Karen, and her brand of petty rule was losing its grip on the neighborhood. They needed me to back off, to stop dragging things through the mud. They were worried about the board's standing, about their own personal futures in the community. I almost laughed when I read it. I wasn't there to make deals. I wasn't going to sit in a meeting where Karen could try to save face. This had gone beyond just a bad interaction between neighbors. This was about showing every single person in that HOA that you don't mess with the wrong guy. You don't trample on someone's privacy and expect to get away with it just because you hold some position of power. Instead of agreeing to the meeting, I did what I do best. I sent an email right back. I didn't pull any punches. I told them I wouldn't attend unless they brought an attorney to the table. If they wanted to discuss the matter further, it would have to be in a legal setting. And for good measure, I attached a new invoice, this one covering all the fines Karen had imposed on me for petty violations like non-compliant shed color and improper grass trimming. They weren't expecting that. The HOA board members were suddenly too busy to meet with me. The next day, I got an apology letter from the HOA president, a sheepish acknowledgement that, due to unforeseen circumstances, they'd decided to cancel the meeting. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. They were done. But Karen? She was still trying to hold on to some semblance of power. She tried to convene a special meeting of the board to discuss a community emergency, but that fell flat too. No one showed up. The only person who bothered to attend was the neighborhood accountant, and even she seemed uncomfortable sitting there as Karen spouted nonsense about how she was going to restore order. By then, it was clear. The HOA was collapsing from within. Karen's iron grip was slipping. And as much as she hated to admit it, she couldn't even muster the support of the people who had once feared her. I didn't take pleasure in seeing her like that, well, maybe just a little. But the truth was, Karen had been running a racket for far too long. She wasn't the only one guilty of exploiting the HOA system for personal gain. A lot of these so-called leaders had their hands in the cookie jar, manipulating the system to their benefit. But Karen? She took it too far. Once the tide had turned, it didn't take long for the rest of the HOA to start distancing themselves from her. I kept my distance too. The drama wasn't mine to handle anymore. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd stood my ground, shown everyone how one man with a little technical know-how could bring down a corrupt system, and all it took was a cable in my shed. After everything had died down, I noticed a strange shift in the community. People started talking more. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years started chatting over fences. There was a sense of unity that hadn't existed before. Maybe it was the shared relief of not having to deal with Karen's nonsense anymore. Maybe it was the idea that we could all stand up for what was right without fear of reprisal. Whatever it was, it felt good. It felt like justice. As for Karen? I heard she was trying to move out. The house was put up for sale, but no one was interested. No one wanted to live in a place where you might end up being the next target of a rogue HOA president's whims. Even the real estate agents started warning people off, pointing out the complicated neighborhood dynamics. I guess it was fitting. She tried to be the big fish in a small pond, but the pond wasn't buying it anymore. The power had shifted, and Karen Montrose was just another casualty of her own ambition. And as for me? I didn't need to do anything else. The system had taken care of her. I had no interest in seeing her suffer. I'd already won. Sometimes, the best form of revenge is to let someone else show them the consequences of their actions. And in the case of Karen Montrose? It wasn't just the neighborhood that turned on her. It was the very system she thought she could control. It didn't take long before the tension in the neighborhood became unbearable for Karen. What had started as a small-scale power play on her part had spiraled out of control in a way she could never have predicted. I'd been watching her carefully, knowing she'd either buckle under the weight of her own arrogance or double down. Of course, I didn't expect her to back down easily. No one with that kind of ego does. But as her world crumbled around her, it became increasingly apparent that Karen didn't just lose control of the HOA, she lost control of herself. The bills kept coming. Every Monday morning, her inbox would be flooded with the latest invoice, detailing every gigabyte she'd used from my private network. I wasn't being cruel about it. I wasn't forcing her to pay, well, not directly. I made sure the language on every bill was impersonal, clinical, and legally sound. It wasn't harassment. It was just documentation. Each invoice had a polite reminder that the cable running through my shed was never authorized and that the usage of my internet was, at this point, costing her significant money. By the time the third week of invoices hit, Karen had resorted to calling every lawyer she knew. Her inbox was full of legal threats and nonsensical emails accusing me of extortion. She demanded that I stop harassing her, but I had a simple answer. I'm not harassing you. I'm just charging you for the bandwidth you've been stealing. Her next move was to send a letter to the local police. She claimed I was interfering with a lawful business and illegally tapping into HOA infrastructure. She thought that by going to the cops, I'd back off. What she didn't realize was that the police were far too familiar with petty HOA disputes and weren't about to get involved in some frivolous accusation about Wi-Fi. When the police showed up at my door, they didn't bring the threat she thought they would. Instead, they brought confusion. I opened the door to find 2 officers standing there, the paper from her complaint in their hands. "We just need to clarify some details about the situation," one officer said, his tone polite but strained. I didn't even bother explaining much. I handed over the paperwork, the network logs, and the correspondence between Karen and me. I even included a breakdown of every device she'd used to tap into my network, along with timestamps, IP addresses, and full browsing histories. I didn't have to say a word. The officers didn't look at me like I was the problem. They glanced at the paper, then at me, then back at Karen, who was standing behind them looking as smug as ever. The deputy took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. "There's no law being broken here. You might want to take this to a lawyer, Mrs. Montrose. This looks like a civil matter, not a criminal one." He handed the paper back to her, and with that they left, leaving Karen standing there with an expression that could only be described as disbelief. She didn't know how to play the game anymore. Every move she made was a misstep. Every threat, every accusation she hurled at me fell flat because she didn't have the one thing she needed: credibility. Her last desperate attempt was to try and bully me into paying a fine for the violation of having an unauthorized shed structure on my property. She had the audacity to claim it was a code violation, even though the only code she was concerned with was the HOA's own ridiculous set of rules that nobody but her ever followed. That didn't work either. She couldn't fine me for something that wasn't even an issue, and when I sent her a polite but firm reminder that the shed was perfectly legal, she just stopped trying. The following week, I received another email from the HOA. This time, they weren't threatening. No, they were pleading. They wanted to talk. They wanted to settle this quietly. But there was no room for negotiation. The game had already been won. They'd already proven their incompetence by backing Karen, and now it was just a matter of waiting for her inevitable collapse. I replied to their email with a simple message. "I'm not interested in negotiating. I've already handled this. If you want to discuss anything further, I suggest you have your lawyers reach out." I didn't have time to waste on another round of back and forth. I wasn't just winning anymore. I was running the show. And as Karen continued to unravel, I knew the HOA was finished. Not only had I exposed her for what she was, but I had turned the entire neighborhood's opinion against her. People who had been too scared to speak up before began to approach me with their own grievances, their own complaints about how Karen had run the HOA like a dictatorship. I wasn't alone anymore. The support had shifted. Everyone had seen what happened when one person decided to stand up for themselves, and it wasn't just about Wi-Fi anymore. It was about standing up against a corrupt system. By the time the HOA board held another meeting, Karen had been completely sidelined. They didn't even bother to include her on the agenda. Instead, they discussed the growing concern over her leadership and the need for restructuring. They talked about transparency and accountability, things Karen had never believed in. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. When the board decided to vote her out, it wasn't a shocking moment. It was inevitable. Karen had pushed too far. She'd broken too many rules. And now she was nothing but a pariah. As for me, I'd already won. I didn't need to be part of their system anymore. I'd gotten my point across. I didn't need to continue running the HOA into the ground. I'd simply made sure everyone knew that no matter how big or small the injustice, every action has consequences. Karen's downfall wasn't just about one small mistake. It was about the entire community watching her tear down their trust and their dignity, all for the sake of her own inflated sense of power. I didn't just defeat her. I helped show the neighborhood what it meant to fight for what was right. And in the end, that was worth more than any petty victory. By the time Karen realized the full extent of her mistake, the damage was already done. She had underestimated me. Worse, she had underestimated the community. When she thought her position was unshakable, when she believed she could push everyone around with her so-called authority, she had missed the one key detail that would ultimately bring her down. People were tired of her. As the days turned into weeks, Karen's attempts to fight back only made things worse. The first time she tried to get the HOA board involved, she sent a letter accusing me of harassment. She painted me as the villain in her own personal drama, hoping to rally the others to her side. The problem was, no one bought it. The very people she had once intimidated with her petty fines and outrageous rules now saw her for what she truly was, someone who was using her power to exploit the very system she was supposed to uphold. The HOA board members, those who had once dutifully backed Karen, started reaching out to me in secret. They didn't want to be on the wrong side of the battle anymore. The moment Karen's influence began to slip, they realized they'd been complicit in her reign of terror, and they were starting to panic. They wanted out. They wanted to stop enabling her behavior before it completely unraveled their own positions. But I didn't play their game. I wasn't interested in taking down every board member or hunting down each corrupt act. My target had always been Karen. The rest were just collateral. I was going to ensure she lost everything, and they could handle their own issues. Karen, meanwhile, was in full-on panic mode. She was bombarding the board with demands for action, sending out threats and ultimatums, trying to get them to vote on measures that would restore order and put me back in my place. But her desperation was evident in every email, in every call. She was unraveling before everyone's eyes. She didn't understand that the more she pushed, the more she exposed herself as a desperate, power-hungry individual who had nothing left to offer. The invoices I had been sending, those carefully crafted, calm, professional bills for the stolen bandwidth, had served their purpose. At first, they were just an annoyance. Then they became a constant reminder that she wasn't untouchable. She couldn't get away with everything. What really set the nail in her coffin, though, was when I sent her the last invoice. The one that had a twist she didn't see coming. It wasn't just the usual breakdown of bandwidth usage. This time, I included an itemized list of all the community-wide fines she had imposed over the past year. Fines for things like unauthorized garden gnomes, inappropriate outdoor holiday decorations, and the ever-popular improperly trimmed hedges. I didn't just send her an invoice. I sent a message. In bold, at the bottom of the page, I included the note. Total outstanding fines to be paid within 30 days, or further action will be taken. I wasn't going to make her pay these fines. I didn't need the money. I wasn't some petty thief trying to squeeze her dry. I just wanted to make sure she knew what it felt like to be on the receiving end of her own system. I wanted her to see how it felt to be trapped by rules, regulations, and arbitrary decisions, just like she had done to so many others. Karen's next move was predictable. She went straight to the HOA board again, trying to use the fact that I was publicly mocking her as leverage to get me kicked out of the neighborhood. She called me an embarrassment, claimed I was making a mockery of the HOA's authority, and insisted that something needed to be done about my behavior. But the board wasn't having it anymore. They'd had enough of her drama. They were done with her. The vote to remove her as president was swift and decisive. The funny thing was, Karen had no idea what had happened behind the scenes. She was so wrapped up in her own little world of revenge and retribution that she didn't see the shifts happening around her. As soon as the board voted her out, the rest of the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. People were already talking about who might replace her, and it wasn't going to be anyone even remotely like Karen. The power structure was shifting. The community was finally starting to take back control. Karen wasn't ready to accept it. She tried to appeal the decision, and when that failed, she tried to rally the last few people who still supported her. But even they were starting to drift away. The truth was, Karen had already lost. She just didn't know it yet. She tried to go the legal route, of course. She threatened to sue, claiming defamation and interference with her right to govern. But at this point, no one was listening. The legal threats didn't faze me. I had all the documentation I needed. I had built my case slowly, methodically, and carefully. I had all the evidence to prove she was guilty of what she'd done, and I wasn't afraid to use it. But I wasn't going to waste my time on a legal battle. It wasn't worth it. I could have dragged things out even further if I wanted to, but that wasn't the point anymore. Karen had already been defeated. The community was moving forward. There was no need for me to keep fighting when I had already won. She had tried to destroy me, and instead, she had exposed herself for what she truly was, a power-hungry, self-absorbed bully with no regard for the people she was supposed to serve. I stopped sending her invoices. I stopped responding to her emails. I didn't need to anymore. Her reign was over. The neighborhood had seen enough. It was time for Karen to face the consequences of her actions. And the best part? She never saw it coming. She thought she could control everything, but in the end, it was the very system she built that turned against her. Her ambition had been her downfall, and the moment she tried to take too much, she lost it all. In the end, it wasn't about the Wi-Fi or the shed or the fines. It was about something bigger. It was about showing the world that no one is above accountability. And when people finally wake up and realize they can stand up against bullies like Karen, it changes everything.